We can't really get to what isn't really a destination. It's all just path. It's been my greatest teacher. If I hadn't found myself in the depths of addiction, and they said, okay, you're under arrest.
Oh my. You're trying to look for it everywhere.
Everywhere.
You find it
and
in
there
jail.
it is. That ultimately, is what finding God is it's the medicine is in the wound.
The most important factor to a healthy well-being is feeling connected. Welcome to From There to Here, a safe place where we will explore some of life's adventures so that you do not feel alone.
Hello, this is your hosts of From There to Here, Shannon and Jess, and we are going to just start right away with our heart lens. So digging in, Jess, what's in your heart lens?
I have two.
Oh.
Are we allowed to do that?
I don't know. That's never happened.
I know.
Hold on.
The first one will be really quick.
Okay, as the host, co-host of this podcast, I will approve.
Thank you. My first one, I just felt like I had to let our listeners know because I don't think I've told them. I found my wedding ring.
Oh my goodness.
So that's something I needed to share because I had talked about that and how loved I felt when I lost it because so many people were like trying to help me find it.
Yeah.
And I found it in my closet. So for all those people trying to help me find it,
you can stop.
You weren't going to. So that was amazing. And then so that's the short one.
Okay.
This one won't be that long either, but you know how sometimes I go on tangents.
Yes. It's okay. I do too. It's fine.
My second heart lens today is just this connection that I have and Jude and Jess and like our family has with Jude's biological grandmas, both of them. So just this past week, we organized some upcoming visits to see each other. And it's really, truly been an evolution of comfort for all of us, I think, on how this was all going to work out.
Absolutely.
And I know that at the beginning, especially Adriana, Jude's birth mom's mom, was having just like, I don't know, like, is it right for all of us to see each other? Like, is that going to be confusing for Jude or for Jude's biological brother?
Yep.
And I was always like, no, like, this is going to be amazing. Like, it's more love for my child.
Yep.
And I will never deny healthy love to my child.
Absolutely.
And
I think you and I share that with our adoptive children. Yes.
And actually, side note, our guest here today, she is not here to talk about that, but she was actually an adoption social worker. Yeah. So there's just like this whole full circle. Yeah. Anyway, it just feels really good that we're going to get together and see them and spend time. And I'm excited about it.
Yay. I like that.
Yeah.
That is
in your heart lens
That
today.
is a good heart lens, Jess. So school started and we're kind of getting into the swing of things.
Wait, are you heart lensing the end of summer? Okay.
No. I was heart lensing. I was heart lensing the beginning of a smooth start to the school year. Yes.
I like it.
If you are a friend of mine on my personal Facebook page, you will know that. There's a little snafu with the busing on the first day, but we got past it. The boys love the bus, and so
they wrote it extra long.
Yeah. You want me to tell the story?
Accidentally, I do.
Okay, so first time being on a bus as a 4Ker, and it's the twins and then another friend that go to the same in-home daycare, and they are in the afternoon class. So where we live in DeForest, it's Monday through Thursday, and it's a PM class for 4K, and they are so excited. They get on the bus. Ben follows them the first day to make sure everything's okay. They get off the bus. We're all good. After school, they get on the bus to come back to their in-home provider, and they're supposed to get off around 2:45. It's like 3:00 and they haven't gotten off. So in-home provider texts me and is saying, buses on the first day of school are typically a little late, but, just kind of wanted to let you know the boys haven't gotten off yet. She's like, I did see a bus drive by, but I don't think it was their bus. Okay. So then I call my husband, and Ben, of course, is very anxious as I am. And so goes to school. They both Nicole and Ben called the bus company. The bus company had very conveniently left their phone off the hook. So it was busy.
Oh my God.
It was busy every time
because
they
every
called.
parent was calling because
I
every
imagine, yeah.
anyway.
So anyways, Ben goes to the school and the school's like, well, they're probably just still on the bus, and the bus now goes to Harvest, which is the intermediate school, 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, and picks those kids up. And I'm thinking, my babies are going to be on the school bus with these older kids? I don't think that's going to be safe. But
right.
I'm thinking, this happened to Brielle a couple years ago, and she got off the bus crying. So, of course, I am thinking they are going to be crying. They're going to be scared.
Yeah.
They got off. Well, long story then. The bus did the route, noticed that kids were still on the bus, turned around and said, what are your names? And Hawk and Riggs and the other little boy said their names. And the bus driver was like, you were supposed to get off at the first stop. How come you didn't get off? Well, probably because they had no idea they were supposed to get off.
Right.
But they get to Nicole's house. I am there at this point. Ben's there. Nicole's there. The boys get off and they're like, that was the best ever. So then at dinner time, we always ask them questions about their day. And this just happened to be the question of the day is like, what was your favorite part about the first day of school? And the both boys, same time, the bus. And I was like, well, good thing because you rode it for about 40 minutes extra. So I'm glad it didn't cause any trauma for you. But yes. Long story, my heart lens was just the smooth transition into school. If you're a parent out there, you can appreciate just...
I really like the bus story, though.
Oh, yeah. My dad
liked it
also
and we're
really
crying.
likes that bus story. He has told everybody about the bus story. Yes.
It's a good one. All right. We have a guest here with us today. What is in your heart lens, Megan?
Oh, well, I could say just sitting here this moment in this sunny room and being with two beautiful women who are much younger than me and loving that and loving being the age that I am, which is I'm going to be 62 next week. And
next week?
Yeah.
Well, happy birthday early.
So that makes me a Virgo and haven't loved that all my life.
I'm Virgo rising, so I get you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
But just really loving all that has brought myself or me to this place in my life and feeling this amazing combination of stability in the things that have kind of seated themselves in my life in this point in time. And this innate sense that it's all going to change. And that's exciting and what I'm signed up for rather than being how the other alternative, which it would be just to try to, dig in and keep things from changing. So even though I'm in the crone years of my life, I feel like in so many ways I'm just getting started.
Oh my goodness. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks for sharing.
Sure.
If you have a heart lens you would like to share with us, please reach out to us on our website, podcastfromtheretohere.net. We would love to hear from you. And as we were saying before these microphones were turned on, I don't like doing that. I don't like saying, go to my website, like the button, push subscribe, because I know you're just going to do it if you like us.
And if you have, thanks. And if you haven't, it's okay.
Our guest here today is somebody very near and dear to my heart. And I don't know if she even knows that, actually. When I was going through infertility, I started a yoga practice at Perennial. And Megan, who is here with us today, has been one of my greatest, wisest teachers and has really helped me be, I don't know, not only find myself, but also really help me through some of those really dark days of infertility. And I've just learned so much. And if you've been listening to this podcast, I talk about Perennial probably almost every other episode because it's one of my favorite places. It's like my home away from home. I always actually go practice before I come and record into this microphone.
Yes.
So anyways, she is here with us today. And like we always keep it raw and real around here, I'm going to do that by telling you I'm about to read to you this beautiful description that Megan wrote for us for this episode. So in that, here we go. The journey away from our true nature and back to it is a uniquely traveled path for each of us. Megan is here to share parts of her journey and also about the sustaining love affair she has with yoga and the non-dual path of Tantra. Is that how I say it?
Tantra.
I forgot to ask before we started recording.
Tantra.
Tantra. Megan's Dharma, mission, if you will, is to show others how to turn towards yogic and tantric practices and as a means to orienting themselves inside the life they're living. These practices don't supply us with a detailed map or an outdated and rigid doctrine. They offer us a compass. I totally feel that deeply in my heart when I practice at Perennial. Megan was born and raised in Wisconsin. She enjoyed a 25-year career as a social worker, seated by a desire to change the world around her and address suffering in the outside world. For the last 15 years, she has turned toward the inner world, and as a yoga teacher and the curator of Perennial Yoga, she is in service to dissolving the suffering and struggle that emanates from within all of us. It arises, not coincidentally, from the same path as true love. So thank you for that beautiful description of what we're here for today. I know to get us started, Shannon has questions right off the bat.
Off of the description.
Dig in. Dig in,
No,
Shannon.
not an uh-oh.
Yeah.
No. So the first piece of your description is the journey away from our true nature. Can you just explain what does that mean, true nature?
Yeah, I'd love to. First of all, thank you again for having me here. When I think about true nature and what yoga and the tantric path teach us is that it is what is true about all of us and what we forget. And being the act of being born, the act of coming into our separate self has this, it's just built into the fabric or the nature of reality that it leads to forgetting our connection to source. And I regularly use different words to describe God, the divine, pure consciousness, higher reality, source energy. All of them mean the same thing, but yoga and my own personal experiences as a very young child taught me that we have this incredible, always connected, energetic cord, if you will, to the divine. And just the reality of life once we're born and leave, the void and then leave our mother's womb and then come out and discover that we're this separate self. It leads to a forgetting of our perfected self, our whole true nature. And that for me led to a lot of suffering and a lot of loneliness and a lot of I often think searching for love in all the wrong places.
Okay.
That's
the song.
famous country song if you don't know it, And, it wasn't until my mid to late 40s when I discovered a practice, yoga and tantra, that I started kind of coming back around and having a method, if you will, to rediscover something that I'd actually never lost or been disconnected from. And that comes with a whole level of, WTF. It didn't have to be this hard,
Yes.
And it didn't have to take this long. But that is what Tantra teaches us, is that it isn't that we're doing something wrong, that it takes us on a path through lots of heartache and lots of joy and beauty, but that it's in that path that we are rediscovering ourselves. We can't really get to what isn't really a destination. It's all just path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Can you describe, I feel like most of our listeners probably understand what yoga is, but they probably think it's just movement. Could you tell us a little bit, like, what is yoga and what is tantra? I know those are big questions, but maybe in a nutshell.
Yeah, they're really big.
Yeah.
Maybe the way I'll describe it is like this. I had in this quest to be reconnected to what I felt like was this, even something I couldn't describe as missing, or define what was missing. I just knew something. There was a hole inside of me that I couldn't fill with human to human relationships. I couldn't fill with alcohol, which I tried for lots of years, So when I just remember taking my very first yoga class, which was at a time when I was at a very low, dark place in my life, and moving through these archetypal shapes and breathing in a room filled with other human beings that were in all states of consciousness and, broken and whole all at the same time. And just the quality of what it felt like to be in that space, I felt more alive and more connected than I had since I had been a very young girl. And yoga means, literally, the word translates as union. And it is union to self, union to our higher consciousness, or union to the divine in any way that you can describe that. And it's about a re-yoking. It's about a remembering what is always there. So it's not a skill building practice. It's not an acquiring of something that you never had, but a revealing of what has always been true. And, of course, yoga is as big of a topic as life is, basically, because it's basically describing the experience of being manifest as both human and divine. So it's this big topic, and it's also a technology or a practice, if you will. And the practice is aimed at helping you get back into this state of wholeness. And there's kind of like two schools of that. One would be that you have to remove yourself from all the aspects of life that would lead you astray. So kind of withdraw from life and all its drama, and practice in a very serious way, and to become like this quintessential yogi sitting on the ground with their thumb and pointer finger connected in this perfect state of meditation, But I don't know about you, but I can do that for about 10 minutes.
Right. Yeah.
And 10 minutes was long.
Right.
For me.
And regular life, and for those of us in the yogic tradition, we're called householders. Those of us who have to be in the regular world because we have children and we need to, nobody's just bringing us our food and our shelter. We have to create it, So on the householder path, we have to find our spiritual nature, or find our connection to source, or develop a raising of our consciousness in the everyday world. And Tantra then says that it's in the nature of what shows up in our everyday reality, that's our teacher. That's our path. It's not sitting on a rock, meditating 23 hours a day and sleeping for one and then repeat, It's doing relationship. It's, doing addiction. It's doing, raising of children and all the highs and lows of that.
Which roll
quite
a lot with toddlers. You can go from lots of extremes really quickly.
And that's the path that I fell in love with, not only because it's doable, but it made life have a reason.
Yes, I do know very much.
Because I don't want to wake up and make my life about, having a better relationship or a different car or a better career or something and there's a lot about the external world that says that's what we're supposed to be striving for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Shannon has another question about that internal, external world.
Yeah. What do you mean by the suffering that's happening in the outside world as opposed to our inner suffering, our inner world?
Yeah. So that's why I became a social worker, So, let me back up a little bit and say, when I was young, 6, 7, 8 years old, in that range, the Vietnam War was still trailing. It was going and kind of coming to its end. But I have distinct memories of sitting at the dinner table with my family, eating whatever we were eating, and watching on TV the ravages of the war, and seeing little children sitting on the roadside, and it looked like their skin had been burned, and you could count every rib in their body because they hadn't eaten forever, and they had this hollow, vacant look in their eyes, and I was torn to shreds by all of the impact of what I saw as suffering. But the thing that ate away at me the most, and it still kind of gets me emotional, is I thought, where is God and where is their mother? Or this aspect of
they're supposed
whatever
to be
would protect them, whoever is supposed to protect them. And it was back then that I felt like somebody has to do something about this, and it just stayed with me forever. And I remember my parents being kind of amazed that I was so affected by this, because I literally couldn't sleep and, get on with the business of being a 7 or 8 year old. I just wanted to figure out what I could do about it. And so, fast forward, go to college to become a social worker. And then it was not by mistake, that I found myself in the world of international adoption and traveling to countries and still seeing kids, even though they were in orphanages, and in maybe their physical needs were being met, but their little hearts were, and their psyches were just
what that does to developing brains. Right?
Yeah. Being in service, if you will, that way. And then my whole human service career took me into more developing programs around the area of mental health and addiction, some urban ministry programming that we did to address poverty and its effects and so forth. And all of these, I guess I'd call them, structures and programs that we put in place, the agency that I worked for and what social workers do, is really great at addressing, mostly effective, but not completely effective at addressing these basic needs that people live without. And it kind of shores people up and keeps them alive, but it doesn't really help them address the other end of the continuum, which is to really step into their capacity to be fully alive and to contribute what they're here to contribute. And I felt like that was still the piece that was missing in the work that I was doing. And not coincidentally, it was also when I was discovering yoga as this inward path, which made me realize that, in order to step into our fullness and our wholeness in terms of our dharma, which is our purpose or our mission, we really need to turn towards ourselves and know that all the keys or all the remembering and reunion that needs to happen is self turning towards small s self, turning towards capital S self. Or another way to say that is re-yoking or relinking that really intimate connection we have with source energy. So another long answer.
No. I appreciate all the answers though, because I think it helps for us to understand your background and like where you've come and why you do what you do.
Yeah. When I was 3, 4, 5 years old, I remember laying in bed. I have a twin sister. We shared a room. And I remember laying in bed at night and seeing these filaments of light come down over my bed. And to this day, I swear anybody should have been able to see them, but because they were so real. And I remember reaching up and grabbing hold of different filaments of light, kind of like almost like collecting them, like I was making a bouquet or threading them together or feeling like certain ones were calling to me more than others and reaching for them. And while it was incredible, I remember feeling great joy and being entertained by it all and all of that. It was also very overwhelming. And
is that something you could talk to your parents or family or anyone about? Okay.
Well,
she's shaking her head.
I would mention it. I did. So I guess the microphone doesn't know this. Yeah. No. I would go into my mom and dad's room sometimes and I would talk about it or say, I think I just basically said I'm scared or something like that, or I can't sleep. And then my mom would move over and I'd climb in bed and then I'd be there and there they would come again. And I would start reaching up and playing with them again or engaging with them. And I remember one time my mom reaching up when my arm was up in the air and grabbing my arm and pulling it down and saying, "That's enough now." And
I feel like our society does that a lot to kids.
Yeah. And it wasn't right then, but shortly after that, they weren't there anymore. Yeah. And, or I wasn't there with them anymore is a better way to say it. And I'd written a book when I was little and the name of it was The House That Talks. And I couldn't read or write yet, but I said it to my mom and she typed it out. And I was like, isn't this an amazing story? And she was like, yeah, it's so cute that you made this up. And I'm like, I didn't make it up. And I was shattered that my mom thought our house didn't talk. And I, was hearing this, and it was a very benevolent, loving, friendly voice. But, and then so what happens when we have access to this and we're around people who don't anymore, it sets us up to feel different or othered or insane, And there were some, not so subtle messages that came from my parents, and I remember my grandma and so forth, saying some things that I was a sensitive one, I was a little fragile, I was special, you know, kind of patting me on the head and going, she's our special one. And I did not take this as special as in good.
Right.
You know, this was special as in, I don't know.
Something's maybe wrong.
Like, we got to be concerned about this.
Yeah.
You know. So all of that kind of set the stage
Which is
up.
probably not just your mom and your grandmother. I mean, like, society does that now
Absolutely.
to kids.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's it was done out of just, it was naive or just, you know, in the course of the way things roll. But it led to this separation, you know, that then as a middle schooler and even into high school, I was raised Midwest Wisconsin, you know, very homogenous kind of environment. And I think all of my friends were either Catholic or Lutheran. That's about as diverse as we got, you know?
Yeah.
And my family, we didn't go to church. And I had this felt sense that they all got to go someplace on Sunday where God was, and I didn't.
Oh.
And that just led to feeling even more ostracized, more othered. And, you know, I have mentioned this to other people, but I'm traumatized by Easter Sunday.
Okay.
Because all my friends would put on these amazing dresses and these Easter bonnets with flowers on them. And I'm like, and then they'd march up to this gorgeous building and go inside, and the doors would shut, and there I would stand, not in there. And that's where God was. And you had to have one of those hats on in order for God to find you or something, you know?
Yeah. Sure.
And these are all like the ways our mind takes us, or mine did anyways. And it just led to more and more isolation. And to be honest with you, I thought, well, if God doesn't want me, I don't want God either, you know? And so it just led to this unlinking with that aspect of me that felt so loved, so seen, so connected, so safe.
Was
all
it
of those
not
things.
until that yoga class that you had alluded to earlier that you started finding that again?
Then in like late college years, I started looking for it in alternative ways, you know,
Such
like
as?
New Age ways,
Okay.
psychics, mediums.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, channeling, meditation, a little bit of astrology, but not so much back then, but just dabbling, kind of like almost at times frenzied search for how I could find, well, apparently, you know, God and Jesus as, you know, that was the way I understood the way you have access to the divine is through Jesus, right? You know, apparently they weren't in my stratosphere. So I'm going to go find where it can be found. And so a lot of kind of searching and then just getting busy with regular life and looking for a replacement in human to human relationships. And this is where it kind of got into like, okay, I want to create this intensity, this intimacy, this connection in my relationships with men, you know? So, you know, well, how that went. I mean, you know, you find something that is similar, but it's not, I mean, you can't come into those relationships half full or feeling a missing aspect of yourself, or to feel fragmented would be better way to describe it, and find wholeness, you know, through two parts don't make a whole, actually, you know?
Two holes.
Yeah, exactly. So I went into the marriage that I had with the father of my two sons. And, you know, while it was all picture perfect on paper, and there was nothing seriously wrong and from the outside looking in. This part of me this is the aspect of having a shadow, which we all have, that we take these parts of us that are wounded or fragmented, and we split off from them, and they don't just go away. They
Emmitt talked
in.
about these in episode 56. Really? She talked about doing a lot of shadow work to be able to do the work that she does now.
Yeah. And that's such an important part of that shows up in the yoga tradition more so than it does in straight up Christianity, where we're just supposed to kind of aspire to rid ourselves of these things rather than turn towards them and say, listen, this is an aspect of you that if you go closer to it, you'll actually and befriend it. It's actually your power is in there. Actually, your beauty, your wholeness can be found by going towards that. Carl Jung says that, really the purpose of life is to make the unconscious known, and that's what shadow work is. It's not going in to find out these like deep, depraved aspects of ourselves. Yes. It's to retrieve the lost parts of ourselves. And yoga was the first time when I felt like on my mat and with my breath and with other people who I felt like were showing up raw and real, that I felt it was safe or actually like legitimate to turn towards those things. And it's been a 15-year or longer than that, but, process of doing that. And it continues.
I was going to say it never ends, right?
It never ends. Yeah.
So you weren't able to fill that hole with a marriage. How else were you trying to fill your hole?
Chardonnay.
Oh, Chardonnay. Okay.
I don't know so much. I think, all of these aspects that like you would want to put into the column of like, oh, that wasn't one of my better moments,
Sure. Yes.
But, unraveling a marriage and becoming an alcoholic,
Would you call yourself an alcoholic?
Yeah. And I consider myself a alcoholic in recovery now.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother kind of like little side note that we don't want to lock ourselves into it, defining ourselves as, to me, to say alcoholic defines a static way of being. And that is true about me. But what is more true now is that I'm in recovery from that.
We've talked to a few different addicts in various ways on our podcast, and I always am interested to hear the perspective of like, what that is to you.
Yeah.
Right.
There's also in that respect, two schools of thought. If you don't really own that you're an alcoholic, you're setting yourself up to going back to being an active alcoholic.
Okay.
To me, it feels like you got to open a drawer, pull that, memory out and hit yourself over the head with it every day, or you're at risk. I don't aspire to that.
Sure.
that way of getting, healed or, staying in recovery. More what it is to be like, God, at this point, I'm like, it's been my greatest teacher. If I hadn't found myself in the depths of addiction, I would not have taken the pivot that it offered me into a way better way of living.
Sure. So how long did that go on for you? That Chardonnay?
I, pretty much from the time that I got divorced, and even before that, I thought, oh, can you really say, raising two little boys is a reason to drink this much wine at night, and
Sure.
that was kind of like, it was my mommy time,
Yeah.
but I think that was my head way back then, trying to justify drinking way too much, And then once I was divorced, it was just like the way that I felt it freed me up to be more liberated in my relationships as I was trying to date and, find myself even sexually in a way that I hadn't before. So I relied on it a lot to just feel free. But that went on for 8 years until it became a prison. I would say it was about 8 years where then during that time I was like, this is your antidote is actually what's the problem, And
did you discover that on your own or did someone tell you? I mean, probably has to be both, but
yeah,
maybe.
I would say both.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I didn't really embrace it until I woke up every day being like, this is not going to end well. And, but it's just an uncanny thing. I mean, until you live inside the mind of being an addict, that you can both observe that you are doing something that is so not what you want to be doing. And you don't feel like you can stop it at the same time. It doesn't come from, it's not something you can intellectually work yourself out of,
Sure.
At least, well, I should speak for myself. I couldn't, it was like for me, it needed to be a hitting bottom moment. And
Are you willing to share what your bottom moment was?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, like a lot of other things, requires a little backstory. So after I got divorced, I was single for, I think, what was it, like 15, 17 years. After 17 years-ish of this life, I met a person who became my second husband. And it was also, perfectly designed by the universe because he was a Christian musician and pastor. And so here it was like this, if you wanted to find God, this was about as close as I could get, Here was this.
So still trying to find this higher power.
Yep. Yeah. And I was looking for a way to find in this realm, in this way, someplace, a way to access God, and marrying somebody who pretty much had a kind of a God complex and loved to follow Jesus and kind of be Jesus or, and be somebody who wanted that kind of connection again. We fit together perfectly. But it was that same old story. My strategy and his strategy fit together perfectly. So it's not by coincidence that we found one another. But it also wasn't going to work, even from the get-go, you can know that. But anyways, we met. I was already clearly into my addiction with alcohol, and then found this thing which it seemed like, okay, maybe this can work. And it unraveled pretty quickly for reasons, some of what I've stated, and then there were other things too. And it unraveled pretty quickly. And in that course of, in that short marriage, I often liken it to feeling like I just said, this is when I'm going to put the pedal to the metal with my alcoholism. And I just decided to go, I just wanted to hit bottom. Something inside of me wanted to hit bottom sooner than later. I was just like, I can't keep going this way. So my drinking just escalated. And this is also about when I was in menopause, which is when I was going through menopause. And I've since come to understand that women, alcoholics, often find that their drinking behavior and their tolerance for alcohol changes really dramatically
Interesting.
if they're during menopause. So I was
Like you can drink more or
no,
less?
I could drink the same amount and I'd
be-
black out.
Oh,
like,
wow.
I mean, 2 glasses
This
of
is
wine.
good information for some listeners too, right?
Yeah, I don't know if it's true for everybody,
Right.
but it definitely came true for this alcoholic, And so I was like drinking either the same amount or just slightly more, but I was blacking out. I could not remember
Oh, wow.
anything the next day. And, my days were getting shorter and shorter from the length of the hangover was lasting longer, and I was drinking earlier in the day, It became clear that my husband at the time was being unfaithful. And I intercepted an email that he wrote, which was to somebody else he was engaged with. I'll just say it that way. And it was speaking very disparagingly about me.
Oh, wow.
And it just sent me into a huge tailspin. And we separated and very quickly. And there was very little willingness on my part to try to see it any other way than this just has to be over now, And in retrospect, that's the way it went. And in retrospect, I think it was meant to be the end of something that probably, well, I can't say that it never should have come about, because everything that happens happens because it's meant to. You know?
I believe that 100%.
So, yeah. So we had this like intense ending, and we had a big altercation, and it led to a shouting match. And at one point, I slapped him across the face, and then a few hours later, got a call from the police asking me my perspective on what happened. And I explained some things. And then they asked me if there'd been any physical interaction between the two of us. And I said, yeah, I struck him across the face. And they said, okay, you're under arrest.
Oh, my.
And so I did what any good alcoholic does. I got in my car and I drove out of town, and I proceeded to get very, very drunk. And that was the last time I drank. The next morning, drove back into Madison, went to the police department, went through that whole booking period process, and got a mugshot, and got put in jail, and was in jail for about 5 hours. Maybe it wasn't even that long, but felt like 1,000. But this is when I changed my name from my last legal name is Groves, and I changed it to Grace, because it was sitting in that jail cell that I felt the closest to God as I had felt in 55 years,
You're trying to look for it everywhere. And you find it in
and there
jail.
it is. Yeah. Yeah.
You are not the first person to tell us.
First addict to not the first addict to say that.
Yeah.
To say they found it in jail.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a thing in the addiction world that, your outcomes are either going to be, forget it, death,
Prison
or
Or sobriety.
Ryan off the grid.
Something. Yeah.
Ryan off the grid said the same thing to us.
Yeah.
He named him. We actually quoted it even in our social media. I can't remember the third thing either.
I know.
I think it's sobriety, jail, or death.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Sobriety.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
So it was just in that moment, I knew that my drinking was done. but I did AA for many, many years. So it's not like I just went like, oh, click your fingers and, you know.
Yeah. Blink your eyes 3 times.
Yeah. But I knew that there was just this return to self, you know, in finding myself in the lowest place in my life. I actually felt more love and compassion for myself than I had also ever felt, you know? And that ultimately, you know, is what finding God is it's not also an external being that lives in a church behind these doors that you have to have an Easter bonnet on.
Wear a hat for.
You don't even have to go to the place.
Yep. Yeah. That in our really darkest moments, that's where that connection just emanates up from within us, you know? So I think I forgot the question that
No,
you
that was definitely
answered it.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw another one at you.
Okay. All right.
So in going back to the description, you're really wanting to, I don't know, maybe, but use yoga to help service the dissolving the suffering and struggle that emanates from within all of us. Mm-hmm. How do you do that?
Mm-hmm. Shannon's like, write this down for me so I can.
Well,
right. Yeah.
I
it's
have
a very
had
big.
So lots of addicts, right, that I know of. Some of them are in recovery. Some of them have passed, but also many friends that have committed suicide. So I feel like, how do we do this? How do we dissolve the suffering that's within us all? And is it within us all? Are we all emanating this? Is there something that we're all struggling with? I think this podcast would say yes, that's why we have the podcast, right? To talk about it. But what is your practice in helping people dissolve their suffering? And
the practice of yoga says that suffering, and Buddhism and actually all the major wisdom traditions and religions acknowledge that suffering is it's built into the equation. It's part of the human experience. And it's not like it's perfectly designed to bring you back to self-love or to wholeness. It is in the suffering that we re-yoke, we reunify all the parts of us that get fragmented off. So when we are born and come into a sense of separateness, it leads to this inability to be aware of our wholeness or that we are love, you know? And it's more of a tantric practice in saying that the medicine is in the wound, you know? The practice is being on the path of finding yourself again, of going into the shadow, going into the wound, going towards the traumas that we've had, and befriending that part of us that gets put off into the shadows, you know, that gets put, I don't know where it's hiding inside of me, behind my gallbladder. I don't know, you know?
Maybe your liver.
Right, yeah. Exactly. I don't know why I didn't think of the liver, Jess.
That was quick, Jess.
As I was like crying over here, because I'm not kidding. Like what you were saying is really emotional to me, because I feel that. And the infertility and then a nightmare of an adoption process.
Yeah.
Like I would do it all again.
Yeah. I know. It's so liberating to realize that there's a practice and that there's so much more in common with all of us than there is different, isn't there?
Yes.
You know?
And I love that you said practice too, because I feel like I always try to drive home this idea is that you don't have to do this all perfectly. It is just a practice. All of this, right? Yoga, life. Like,
Yeah.
it's all just practice
Yep.
for the next one.
Yep. And to switch your kind of paradigm or your perspective around that, everybody who comes into your life, and the circumstances that we're born into, our soul perfectly chose. And I used to kind of believe this, or I wanted to believe it, but it proves itself true more and more every single day, that when something shows up, or someone shows up in my life, instead of being, and it's not going well, or something, a day just isn't going well, instead of like beating myself up or thinking there's just something fundamentally broken with me that somebody else would be able to know how to handle this situation or this circumstance better than me, and what the F is wrong with me, Now, and more often than not, but not always, I can be like, this is fascinating. My best friend, as you know, is Carla, and we're always just like, it's fascinating, And that's what, by the time you get to be this age, and that's what I hope people younger and younger on the path of spirituality, instead of being like, I got to figure out how to fix myself, or even heal myself, I mean, it's to be like, this is fascinating, so like
ride this ride.
Yeah.
So what about what do you say then to like Angel, who we interviewed in episode 55, who she's lost 3 babies at like 19, 20 weeks, like that? You can't say to them that's fascinating, because it's not. And you can't say to her everything happens for a reason, or there's a meaning in everything. But how do we help dissolve her suffering?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, to let her feel it 100% for as long as she needs to feel it, and to honor that suffering is going to show up like grief, but it's going to show up like rage. It could convert to a addiction,
Sure,
I mean, there's just like,
I think what you're saying is like, you have to feel it. Sometimes the crap that's happening in our lives, you have to feel it.
Yeah. There's also,
you can't let it be a shadow. You have to dig in deeper to like connect with that shadow.
Yeah. And let it reveal itself in the way that, I mean, grace, which is like this energy that we can tap into, and then sometimes it feels like it's really far away, and then sometimes it's right there sitting next to you in a jail cell, It just trying to hold on to some sense that there is a bigger story or a bigger force, that even if I can't see it right now, it still exists,
And possibly not in this lifetime.
Exactly. Some, what Matryoshka dolls are? They're these nesting dolls from Russia. Yeah. There's lots of ways that's a great analogy for what the yoga practice is. But one way I like to think about it is like, we're lifetimes inside of lifetimes inside of lifetimes. And it's absolutely true that it's nonsensical that somebody would have that many in the context of this lifetime. That's
devastating.
Misery. It's devastating. And that can be true. It is true. But what's also true is that there's another wider lens, and another wider one, and another wider one, all the way out to the place where that suffering is dissolved, and we're not even supposed to be able to make sense of it. I think in the context of this lifetime,
Yeah.
Why try to make sense
Yeah.
of it? Just
because it doesn't make sense.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think
That's a really insufficient answer to somebody when they're in the middle of something.
Yes, but I think though, and we've had a lot of very powerful interviews, and I cannot remember who said this, but sometimes it is about just giving it away to the divine power, right? Like giving it away to the universe or your God or whoever you practice and believe in. But sometimes holding on to those things, you're never going to find the reason.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to give it away.
Yeah. Yeah. If there's something about the human condition where we tend to do one of two things, we can push away, we can deny, shove it down into the shadows, into the liver. Or we can become so enmeshed with it. It's like it just consumes us and we cannot see anything other than it. Both
that was
of
us
those.
in infertility,
Oh my gosh.
100%.
Yeah.
Like both of us.
And
I will speak for you.
No, you can because you know the story, but like in
Yeah.
other aspects of my life too, right? Like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And when we go to those places, those ends of the continuum, which we all do repeatedly throughout our lifetime, having a practice like yoga or having friends and, people are just there just to let us spin out because it's really actually just how it has to go, and not like feel like I should be handling this better or the universe should not be doing this to me,
Yeah.
So, I'm not saying it's easy,
No.
but there it is a game changer, if you will, once you can practice kind of continually trying to span out from the place you're in right now, and sometimes it's as chunking it down to as short as I am going to go to bed right now, even though it's 6:00 at night, because tomorrow when I wake up, it will be a different day, It might not be better. It's just going to be different. And then also, once you get to have more decades of life behind you, you realize that, there are these multi-layered aspects to your life and what you cannot see right now. It's kind of like that saying
like
you can't
kinda-
see the forest for the trees kind of thing, You're just, the whole world is that one tree you're sitting on right now,
Oh, I feel
It's a
that.
blip in time.
Being
Yep.
divorced from my ex-husband is why having relationships with Jude's adoptive parent in the way that I can't. Like, it's just, it makes sense now.
Yeah.
You're like,
say more about
so
that.
before I'm divorced from somebody who was an addict, and Jude's biological parents have struggled with addiction. And for me, old me would have been like, they're losers. I want nothing to do with loser people that are addicts. But the me that has that knowledge because of what I went through with my ex-husband that I would never change, I can look at that in a whole different light.
Yeah.
Like these are just amazing people
Yeah.
that are suffering.
Yeah.
And it is not, they are not bad people. It's someone, but I wouldn't have known that had I had not had that experience.
Yeah.
It just, but then I was like, why is this happening to me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I hear you. My practice right now is to do that with politicians.
thank you. Yes. And there you have it.
I think I did not sit down in my chair today and think I was going to cry. But this episode has brought out some feelings for me, and thank you
You're
for
very
coming
welcome.
today.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I'll just add one more thing. The three of us were, by all appearances, born into female bodies, and I think that there's some aspect of being mothers, however we come about becoming mothers, that we understand what it is to be life force in the form of being the creators of things, And that, I'm so grateful for that, because it's, in yoga, there's this idea of the divine feminine and the divine masculine, or Shakti and Shiva are the words or the names given to this same concept. And Shiva energy is the created. It's the what already exists, and it's in this kind of solid form, if you will. It upholds structure and sameness, and there's great things about that. We need that, But it's through the divine feminine force, or the creating, or the Shakti energy, that life comes into form, and it moves, and it expresses itself, and it rides life, and creates life, literally, and then allows it to continue to express itself. And our external world, to bring it all the way back to that, validates things that are in form, things that are solid, things that are already manifest, and we find safety in creating those things and trying to hold on to them. And then along comes this divine feminine force that wants you to move towards your true nature and says, no, you're holding back here. You're resisting the flow of life. And also in the yoga / tantric tradition is a fierce goddess called Kali, and she is considered the dark mother, and she comes and finds us in jail, or finds us in our weakest, if you will, moments, and she and my vision of her is kind of taking our face in her hands, not so gently and tenderly, but like a mother who wants to,
Using
save
your
their
middle
kid.
name too.
Uses their middle name and kind of says, you're not going to shrink back. I know what you're capable of, and not in terms of external success, but I know what you're capable of in terms of like truly being in this incredible experience of being alive. And the world needs you to do it, If you want to be that person who shows up for that little girl who was sitting, that symbolic little, that person who is a symbol of suffering, sitting on the side of the road during the Vietnam War, go inside. Do your work, So that's what I'm just getting started with.
Where can people find you?
At Perennial?
Yes.
Two locations.
Yeah, we have 2 locations, both in Madison, Fitchburg, and at Garver Feed Mill in Madison. I teach 4 times a week, 3 or 4 times a week, and lead our teacher training program, which happens twice a year, excuse me. It's a 200-hour. We call it yoga school because we want people to show up for it and participate in it if they just want to immerse in yoga. You should be doing it, Jess.
It's on my to-do list for the past 5 years, but
you'll get there.
I will.
It's right. Yeah.
I actually have a proposal of a schedule for you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I want to start to write more. It's been a goal of mine. And I also recently, this is the way, Spirit is speaking to me more and more, and I'm listening more and more through intuition and inspiration that just kind of bubbles up. And before I have any chance to step back from it, I try to say it out loud to people. So recently, I started talking on our website about a mystery school that we'll be creating. It'll probably start a year from now because fall is the right time in the course of nature to start something like this. And really it's going to be about inviting other people to step into becoming their own spiritual authority, which is what this whole journey of that I've been trying to describe here in this probably really long podcast now is about like, not seeking outside, not feeling like anything has been permanently extracted or taken away from you, but instead to turn inward and to treat it all like this amazing mystery that it's just there. We turn back towards it over and over and over again.
Thank you. I want to add too, Perennial has so much more than just yoga classes. There are circles for people to join. There are, I know we don't want to sound like a commercial, but.
It all falls under the umbrella of what we call the Perennial Way. And what that means is that, perennial, we could think of all the beautiful flowers that are outside the window there that, and also Jess and her mom gifted me with amazing perennials from their garden that are now growing in mine, which is such a sacred kindred connection. I love it, But perennial also means anything that goes around kind of and dies and it always comes back. And the Perennial Way is the truths that are found in all religions, all wisdom traditions. Those core truths are, and those core practices that are, you could say, essential for all of us to come back into our true nature are what the Perennial Way is all about. So it's sacred circles, which are opportunities to get together. You had Amanda Birnbaum on here a while ago talking about her embodied emotions, sacred circle. And then we have rituals, which is another amazing way to connect with nature and the cycles that we all move through in the seasons, and wisdom talks, and like I mentioned, yoga school already. So
there's just so much happening over there, and
good. And hopefully most of all is what I found very first on my mat, which is this community and communion with self and others. And it feels like that's growing and deepening every day, every year.
We end each of our episodes with a quote, and Megan has shared this one by Anne Lamott with us. You own everything that happened to you. Tell your stories. Thank you for listening and being a part of our community. Please follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
If you'd like to connect, we can be reached at podcastfromtheretohere@gmail.com. We hope you continue on this journey with us.